First one we're going to talk about is equity position. There may or may not be an equity position in any particular property. You buy a property off of the MLS, usually you're paying full price, so there is no equity position. If you are buying through the MLS, usually there's no equity position, but sometimes there is. Sometimes you come across a property, you have a family member that's selling it, or you inherit a property, etc. So that's the amount of the value that the property is less whatever you have in it. An equity position at purchase is really important to find out, not always, but sometimes if you're unsure. The reason I even put this in here is because I've seen where people who should know better have bought properties over the value that they could have gone down the street and bought another property at. A property manager, this was back in like 2009, 2010, they bought a property from auction where that needed some work, it needed some repairs, and they could have gone literally down the street and bought a property for $5,000 less that didn't need any repairs. So this is really why we include this. So the equity position is determined by the fair market value less your purchase costs, less your closing costs, all other costs. So if you buy a property at 90, your purchase costs are 5, and the value of the property is at 100, then you have a $5,000 equity position in your property. Pretty simple. Now, if there's repairs, and I've seen a lot of people make mistakes on this, we'll use that same 90,000 purchase price, 5,000 in closing costs, and the fair market value is 100,000. If your repairs are 2,000, you still have a $3,000 equity position. If your repairs are 10,000, you're actually negative in equity position. Over the years, as a real estate agent, because I've worked with investors, I've sold their properties, I have advised them, and they have put the property on the market without doing any repairs. And the reason is, in a hot market, it's kind of the greater fool concept. So let's use that $100,000 property. It needs $15,000 in repairs. The buyer should be buying the property at about $85,000 for that property that after repairs is worth 100 and the 15. That's just break even all the way around, not including all the suffering costs of making the repairs and performing the repairs, and the time and the labor and the holding costs for the time that you're doing the repairs, etc. At a very basic number, they should be buying that $100,000 property at 15 repairs at 85. But I've seen many times where I put the property on at 90 and then have bidding wars because people see it as they're getting an equity position in the property because it's less than the other ones on at 100,000, and then they'll compete and maybe the property will sell at 92. But it's because whoever's the buyer, is not looking at the equity position and counting in the repairs. Mike, what do you want to add to that?
Yeah, or they're desperate to do a rehab and they're not paying attention to their numbers where they could basically walk away. Now, if it's a long-term hold, you could always do okay on a long-term hold. It may take you 5-10 years, but that could make sense.
Let's talk about that really quickly as well. Back in 2013, Blackstone was buying stuff over market value, and everyone thought they were crazy. So is that same $100,000 property, and Blackstone had come in at 110,000 and beat out all of their buyers. And everyone thought, oh, Blackstone's crazy, but it's great if you can sell the Blackstone because they're going to pay over the asking price. And everyone looked at Blackstone as losing money because they were buying over the current value of the property. Then all those properties went from 100 to 200,000. Everyone thought, oh yeah, Blackstone was so smart because they bought a ton of properties. And even though they left money on the table, they gave more money to the seller, they got into hundreds of properties.
Well, the question always is who bought in 08, 9, and 10? And everybody I've talked with, I asked them, are they happy with that? And they said, well, we should have bought more. Hindsight, I'm one of those. I should have bought a lot more than what I did. But you only have so much money. Real estate's always proven that time works really well with real estate. So if it's not a good market, you just ride it out, add a couple more years to it, and you'll be fine.
My feeling with regard to the equity position, it's important to know upfront when you're buying, are you over, are you under, and then what are the other extenuating circumstances? The sale calculation is where there's an ARV when you're actually doing a flip. It's what's your future cost, what's your closing costs, what are the costs to buy you, and your closing costs for buying, what are your repair costs, what are your holding costs. Somebody who's a flipper is also going to put in whatever money they want to make in the property. So they look at the purchase price as the empty amount. That's the one they're filling in after they know everything else. But this gives you a good idea if you have an equity position in a property by just calculating, okay, I know what my agent has told me what the ARV is, or Zillow or some other ABM has told me what I think the ARV is. Then you calculate all the other costs, take them out, and it tells you whether you have an equity position in the property.